Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quixotic topic. As always, I'm your host, Daquan Peel, and today I'm joined by.
Kayla Dawkins, good morning. I am an
Good
incoming
morning.
freshman at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. I am an
As am
industrial
I.
and systems major, and I'm excited to be here. I love consuming Black art, Black literature, and I think this is a great conversation.
As do I. Thank you for joining us on this podcast today. Not only to
Absolutely.
you, Kayla, but also to any viewers that are listening right now. Congratulations, you get to see it live. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Kayla, I want to ask you, how has Black arts influenced or otherwise inspired you?
Well, I think the short answer is in every way possible. I think most of the art that I consume, at least right now, is more contemporary. So I'm here, and here's an Essence magazine cover. It's one of the most recent issues. There's an image of Billy Porter and this amazing black hat and this Afrocentric gown that he's wearing. And I think just things like that, there's things all around us that remind me of how beautiful blackness is. And I think that's the most important thing to identify, at least in the art that I consume, is that it portrays a impactful, mostly positive view of blackness and black identity that is not usually portrayed in the media and in history books. So I
Right,
think I've
right.
made it I've made it maybe part of my purpose to be mindful about the content I consume. And because there's so much art out there and it does not look the same whatsoever, I think it's important to be aware and to try to
Mhm.
find different ways to find pieces of yourself in it too. Because I think that's another important thing, matching or at least finding similarities with the identity portrayed in the image or the painting or the song. And like I said before, there's so many different types of art and so many ways to connect with it. Why not try to consume as much of it as possible to hopefully impact your life
Exactly.
or move to be a better person in some way possible?
Right. I think that art is super quintessential in like just being the human identity because of its ability to be an outlet for the most, for literally any thought. Everything that can be experienced in life can be transferred and communicated through the license of art. And what's great about it is that there's so many different ways to go about it. And so one thing that makes Black art, I think, especially important for me is the fact that I can see people who look like me and have had similar experiences be able to use such a like wonderful, ubiquitous form of communication. We've had many different ways to talk to people, like, for example, a podcast, a live stream, stuff like that. But one that will probably always be there is the form of art. And of course, that may just be because of how versatile it is. Personally, one very essential factor of Black art that has influenced me is this is actually very Gen Z of me, but Vine was kind of like my first exposure to comedians,
Black,
really, because
yeah.
like this was my first time looking at people being funny and they're not on a stage. It's like people are being funny and they're just at home, and people are being funny and they look like me, and it blew my mind. One of my role models who I still follow and enjoy their content to this day is this Viner who got his start on Vine, Caleb City. I think his brand of humor is just so like expressive and just really like sings to me. And I think I've tried to internalize and like copy it in a sense because imitation is the highest form of flattery. I think that given the age of the internet, that Black art and art in general has really evolved into something that can be just there's not even really words to explain it, to be honest with you. Um, art is something that we consume on such a global scale that we kind of do it subconsciously. And
Hmm.
so I think that that's another reason why black art is important, because if you never see people that look like you creating, then you start to get like that subconscious notion that people that look like you don't create, which is wrong,
Right.
which is totally wrong. And this is why black art, and not just black art, but art from persons of color, POC, is just extremely important and vital to the survival of a truly global culture.
I absolutely agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think something important to mention is that art can be used as a documentation, but also a form of expression during a time of crisis. And so something
Right.
that comes is Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," and
Hmm.
that is it was so timely then, and it is a continuous reminder of the need to go back to creating and feeling that we're valued in a space, because during that time police brutality was horrendous as it is now,
Hmm.
but art was our way to escape and our way to say things, maybe using words, usually using sounds and just noises that were around us to try to
Hmm.
explain what was happening. Because sometimes the English language falls short of
Right.
describing one's emotion or describing one's experience. And I think that the creation of a final product or of even a whole industry, I think that speaks to the fact that we can't always explain things in words. And we also can't always explain things to people who aren't of that background, too. And
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
part of Black art that I think you were speaking on about you seeing yourself in a certain space. And I think
Hmm.
another thing that comes up is the enslavement of Black people. So they took our names, they took our home, they took our identity, but they also took away our ability to read, to innovate, and create. And
Right.
so I imagine as soon as we could, and in every way possible, I wasn't alive 400 years ago, but I can only imagine every way possible, there was some form of creation happening or
Right.
preservation of the art that was back in the homeland. So I think art has strong roots. I think it's evolved over the years, but I think its core continues to remain as a medium of expression when sometimes words are enough.
Right. And then going touching on what you were talking about how once we had the ability to create, we did in full force. This most clearly to me rings the bell of the Harlem Renaissance, in a sense that a lot of people, once they were in a place where they could be relatively free, they took that time to really just document struggle. And it's here where we got a lot of the like domineering African American art forms to this day, stuff like hip hop, hip hop, R&B, rock. Of course, like this is somewhat well known, but like a lot of the influences behind like metal and like rock and whatnot, and like things involving guitars were created by black people and were
Yes.
otherwise appropriated. One thing that is really important is like EDM, otherwise known as heterosexual music. um, a lot of times people kind of just they put it in a box of like, oh yeah, this is just stuff that cis white people enjoy. And I know I'm getting very like partisan about this and trying to create a divide, but it is true that the majority of people who enjoy EDM and which stands for electronic dance music, just to be clear,
Mhm.
do happen to be of the Caucasian persuasion. A lot of its roots actually come from black people.
Mhm.
Most notably, something that one of the most popular genres of EDM right now. I think a clear example of this is that one song that goes like "Eyes blue like the Atlantic." You know that song?
Not
No.
not
Okay,
sure.
never mind.
I probably
Well,
heard.
it's probably on TikTok. Um, that is a house. That's a house track, and house was actually something that was created in South Chicago in the 1940s by this guy named Frankie Knuckles. He was a I'm trying to get it right. He was a trans person of color, and in South Chicago, a lot of times safe spaces for those people, because while racism's going on, like rampant homophobia was also a very big problem, still is. They would congregate in like clubs, and Frankie Knuckles was the like pretty much like, I don't want to say ringmaster, but the leader, the head of the club, the warehouse,
Okay.
and he was and the music that was produced there eventually got the genre named house because of the fact of where it was created. And you can see, going back to the TikTok song, um, that those house influences are still important and revered and survive to this day.
hmm hmm Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I didn't know a lot about EDM in general, but
Hmm.
also Black people's influence in creation of EDM. I didn't know
Right.
until a friend who is in the music industry was telling me about her genre and what she taps into. My family's all from the islands, and so she has that
Hmm.
island flair. But she's into house music, and she was like, it was created by Black people, right? Like, I'm not even surprised at this point because
Right.
we create so much. And even just talking about music, so many genres of music, like you were talking about, it goes to
Hmm.
R&B, hip hop, to jazz, to heavy metal, to
Hmm.
rock, to country. There's just, it's in every space. And so
Right. Exactly.
me to hear that we were tapping into that space that is not really dominated by people of color, POC anymore, at least that I've
Hmm.
seen. So it's nice to see that at least we at the core were there in the beginning.
Right. And so like when you are like sitting back and listening to like the latest EDM hit, and like there is not a lick of melanin to be seen anywhere in the crowd, it's nice to know that at least like the only reason this exists was because of melanin in the past. And like that goes back to the kind of the ability to preserve that art has. And that is why probably it is extremely important for persons of color, and specifically Black people, who have had their culture just essentially erased. I know, well, I don't know, but I'm sure that for other marginalized persons of colors, for example, Native Americans, they have their own cultures and art forms that probably persist to this day that I'm still like subconsciously just entertaining. It's like, oh yeah, this is just here because it's here. Um,
Right.
of course, because of like just because of the segregation that exists, the only time you do see like, I don't want to say real Native American culture, but like the only time you it is presented to you is when it is something that is like extremely important to them, like headdresses and garbs and like rain dances and whatnot. And so like the ability to just kind of know that your culture is there without it being there. It's, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I see what you're saying.
Hmm.
I think the most I can't even think a better way of saying it besides it just sucks. I
Right.
I really
It
find
just
the
sucks.
right say. It's just horrific to imagine
Hmm.
that someone or a whole community of people's culture is erased and
Hmm.
the author of art had a role in that.
Right.
And
Right.
that's important for people who are interested in music or interested in painting or in dance. I think
Hmm.
everyone has to make the cognitive choice to make sure that they're uplifting the communities that either started that or communities that are now tapping into that industry because of their background or because they're marginalized. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
I think I really like what you were saying about the preservation of art and how it's so hard, but it
Hmm.
shouldn't be that hard.
It really
And
shouldn't.
people can find fossils in the ground of presumed dinosaur skulls, but you can't preserve
Hmm.
a whole community's identity? That seems like an
Right.
issue.
Exactly.
That seems very American, but probably not very American because colonialism is not specifically American.
Right. It's
But
not an American thing.
yeah, but all to say is that because of the erasure or the lack of prioritizing art done by people of color or by other marginalized groups, it is very important that people in those industries thank publicly, show appreciation for the
Right.
communities that started it, and also uplift those who are in the industry now.
Right, exactly. And then like that is another angle is that like the whole industrialization of culture in the sense that like
Woo!
now we've arrived at a place where going back to rap, for example, which stands for rhythm and poetry, has a lot of people would postulate that it's been dumbed down in a sense because of the rise of this thing called like mumble rappers, where people will go on and say what is essentially fruitless and for the sole purpose of making money. I think one of the most notable examples of this is Little Pump's Rain. I have no idea what he's doing now, but I do know that he dropped like at least four different songs that were all hits, and he probably made like multi-million dollars off of it. And then
Ooh,
like because
wow.
if we go into like analyze Lil Pump, like sonically, none of his songs are particularly distinct, other than it's a different trap beat and it's a different pattern of syllables. That's it.
Mm.
There's not a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of thought put into matching the syllables to the beat, but in terms of what those syllables are, notice I'm saying that and not words.
Yeah, yeah,
It's interesting to see just how commodified culture can become because
yeah.
and this sort of goes into cultural appropriation because it's like is that the right thing to do? Is it okay to make money off of someone's culture because, just for the sake of making money? And like this of course like goes back to more structures of government and structures of society in the sense of like because of capitalism, for a lot of times people feel forced to like this is what I have to do. A
Hmm.
lot of people there's a conversation between having just like I must sell my culture in order to make money.
Hmm.
And I believe this is sentiment that has been expressed in a litany of rap songs, Kendrick Lamar being one of them. It escapes me now the song that he did it, but he ended up calling out like the entire hip hop community simply because of how it was treating its artists in the sense
Wow.
that there's such a big divide between like artists and art that
Hmm.
people don't really care about the artist and people just want to make money off of the art.
Yep, yep, yep. You hit the nail on the head with that one. And that is a conversation I have seen occur more often than not, especially maybe in the past 10 years, the years that I can remember. And I think the most notable example of that is Kanye West. And
Mm,
so when he first was out in the press saying that slavery was a choice, and Van Lathan, formerly at MTV, and he called him out on it. When that whole thing was happening, people were trying to figure out, can you support the artist and can you support the art, but do you have to do them at the same time? And I never really found an answer that I really connected with wholeheartedly, but I agree with you in that it's just
mhm.
hard to find the balance between the two because at the end of the day, at the most basic level, the artist makes the art. That's what
Right.
art means. That's what the word itself in its most basic form means. So I think to separate them is a challenge. I think to
Hmm.
support one and not the other is also a challenge.
Right, right. And so I want to interrupt this conversation just a little bit to say that hello to, I believe that's Kyla Rain.
Lorraine,
You are the first viewer to comment. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on this podcast today. This is, as I said before, being recorded live, and so comments will be entertained on a relevance basis. This, of course, being an exception. Going back to the discussion, I think Kanye West is a very interesting case study in how very interesting case study in art versus artist because
mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of ways it can be said that the art corrupted the artist because like I think it's a relatively appreciated and common opinion that Kanye's older music was a lot more, I don't want to say better, but more representative of him as a person and his experiences. Of
Also,
course, there are like more recent works like The Life of Pablo or My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy that are a bit more representative of him personally, but in the sense that money is a large corrupter of people. I think that like that has definitely taken a toll on his mental, and this is something that has showed up in his recent outbursts, like his particularly small stint of running for president.
Yeah.
I think because inherently running for president requires a lot of egoism. Like you have to feel a certain way about yourself to think that you can be president. I actually had a conversation with my roommate about this earlier. Like what does it like genuinely take to be a president? And so for Kanye to say that really speaks a lot about where he is mentally. And given to the fact that he has recently been checked into therapy,
Hmm.
we can assume that it was not the best place.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think you summed that up very well. Very well. I'll just leave it there.
That being said, I am not the biggest Kanye stan. I'm sure there's someone who has spent a lot more time analyzing their music and can point out like, oh no, actually, well, you see in his most recent single, he actually dropped an antidote that references back to that one time when he was 12 and he tripped and broke his ankle. You
Yep.
see what I mean? Um, but going forward to the preservation of art, not going forward, going back. Um, and art being able in its like solidified form, talking more about like paintings and whatnot and like pottery and like stuff that's a bit more tangible. In
Hmm.
the 1970s and 1990s, there was a really big push to collect and promote um, black art and allow people to view it in the same way that you would view things in like the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. For example, we have the creation of Claude Booker and Cecil Ferguson in 1968, the Black Arts Council, which was a council that pretty much just went around and collected art from around the U.S. and put it in places where it could be seen and appreciated in a professional light. We also have things like the Brockman Gallery by Dale Brockman Davis and Alonzo Davis in 1967, which was just like a normal art gallery. How normal can art galleries really get? And most notably, we have, as you couple of minutes, first issue of Essence. Am I still connected? Okay,
There
cool.
you go.
You were buffering for a bit. Word. Um, Again, we have to apologize for the newness of the podcast. This is the first time we're having it online, stay at home, given the recent pandemic. So please forgive us for any missteps, brief disconnections, stuff like that. But going back to the podcast, Kayla, I want to ask you: have you ever been to like a museum and have gotten like that feeling of like just looking at something that was like either so just impossible or like foreign that it made you just really stop and go like,
I don't know if I can think of a particular scenario or a particular situation when that's happened. I think the purpose of art is to evoke some sort of emotion. That's the one thing I learned. And I can't remember
Mhm.
which class this was in or which environment I was in, but someone said there's a reason why someone makes money off of a blank canvas with one small design in the middle, like a square. And there's a
Right,
reason why someone makes money off of that who's a distinguished artist versus a 5-year-old student experimenting with colors and shapes. So
right,
I don't have a particular experience, but I think that in general, art is supposed to make you feel some type of way about something. And
word.
it's going to evoke something different in every viewer. And I think that's important too. And so when people say, oh, what does that mean? What does that look like? You can ask for the story behind the art. But I think, at least in my experience, the artist is probably not going to tell you which way to feel about it because it's
Right.
a starting to launch you into some emotion or to remind you of something that happened a long time ago or the possibilities in the future. So, in general, art is just an amazing medium to make you feel something.
Right. And I think on that, one thing that is important for the distinction between like a 5-year-old just like doodling and like a 27-year-old making like the next abstract masterpiece is intent. I think
Hmm.
that like because a 5-year-old like kind of just scrawling on a canvas is like they're trying to get their motor skills down. Like they're trying to figure out how to have hands for the first time in forever. A 27-year-old drawing a random scrawl has motor control. At the most basic level, they're trying to, as you said before, like there's a reason why they're doing this, and like there's a reason. There's a very like large, like a red swath, for example. There's a reason why the blue on this painting is specifically in like the bottom right corner. And this goes in a little bit into like color theory and whatnot and what like colors mean to us on a subconscious level. But
Right.
oh no. Oh no, my point.
Okay.
The train of thought has left. The train okay, going back to the color theory. I think the colors that go into art is something that is interesting and something that we should talk about. Okay, I'm sorry. That was a little bit contrived. But
It's okay.
yeah, abstract art is interesting because there's not much to it other than just colors. Like it's just a mishmash of colors that allow you to really define your own meaning. And one thing that I do want to bring up actually is there is this show called Blackish,
Yes.
created by this
Kenya
one
Barris.
person. I forget what his name is. Yes, him. Wait, what was it again?
Kenya Barris.
Kenya Barris. And so Kenya Barris had created another show that was his supposed to be kind of a autobiography of his life and kids, but with like a comedic twist. It was very
Oh,
oddly presented.
Netflix.
Yes, it's on Netflix. There was one like very poignant episode um, about Kenya playing himself, buys like a very big canvas and puts it up in his house, and it's like covered in like speckled like stardust and whatnot. There's like just a lot of really tiny like white dots. And one of the main like the A plot of that episode is that Kenya interprets that as the fact that like you can't escape the blackness. That's like his truth that he finds from that painting. Of course, that might talk a little bit more to his psychology and personal viewpoints on African American identity, which you can touch on later. But what they do in the episode that I appreciate is they actually bring in the artist and they talk about what their intent into putting the painting was. And what they were getting at was more kind of like the uplifting and promotion of blackness, in the sense that just like the void of space, it is everywhere and it's not something that should be escaped as much as embraced.
Mm. Wow.
And
Interesting point.
yeah, it's deep. I wish I remember the artist's name. If I have a chance, I'll look it up.
Okay.
Um, Going to the psychology point, another thing about evoking an interaction about art is that it really tells you a lot about yourself, and you can really like glean a lot about another person. For example, like if you look at, let's say there's like a red flower on a painting, and one person looks at it and is like, oh, this is an interpretation of a rose. It's a symbol of love and whatnot. And another person comes at it and says like, oh, this rose has been bloodied, or like this rose is red because it's grown from a corpse, or something of that nature. That
Dark.
talks. The fact that two people were able to get two completely different interpretations from the same piece of art is telling of themselves more than it is of the piece. And I think one of the bigger overarching discussions when it comes to art is kind of whether or not you should be able to get those different interpretations. Um,
Agreed.
Jumping onto that, when it comes to black art, I'm gonna go back to rhythm and poetry. a lot of it
Mhm.
has been created for like very specific intent. Like a lot of the messages have been presented in digestible but also clever ways in order to tell a story. Most notably, personally, Outkast, for example, has also been a very big influence in my life. So big, in fact, that my middle name is named after Andre 3000 because my parents liked him so much. A little fun fact about me.
Oh my gosh.
And so, um,
Fun.
I did a lot of framing for this, but if you're able to get two different interpretations of the same Outcast song, is that something that is beneficial to the promotion of Black culture, or like should you be able to get multiple interpretations of works from people of colors, even if
Mm,
they were, despite them being mostly created for a very specific reason? I want you to
right.
weigh in on that.
Right. That's a really interesting question and perspective. And I was actually just listening to Kendrick Lamar, "We Gonna Be All Right," because that is a song that's like a quarantine song for me. And especially
Hmm.
during
Hmm.
the horrendous police brutality and the other pandemic of systemic racism that's happening, that's been a song, that's been a
Hmm.
staple that I've been listening to just kind of get me through the day or just something to make me feel better about life. So that means something different to me, and that can mean something different to you. But I think that's the beauty of self expression. It's the expression of the person who originated that piece or that work. And then it's
Hmm.
really just out there in the open for other people to interpret and make their own, because it's supposed to, like we talked about before, art is supposed to make you feel something. It's the something that's important. It
Right.
doesn't say make you feel happy. It needs to make you feel angry. It needs to make you feel that you need to go get revenge on somebody for some relationship, probably talking about in an R&B song. But it's just supposed to make you feel some type of way about something. So
Right.
it's gonna encourage you to do that thing or encourage you to self-reflect. And I think that's another thing. Critical thinking is tied especially to music, at least for me.
Right.
I just think the impact is it's boundless. It's
Right.
infinite. It's and even if you listen to a song specifically multiple times, you're going to get something different out of it. Just like a movie. If you watch a movie multiple
Right.
times,
Right.
different
It's
out of
like
it.
when
Pick up
you
on-
right. It's like when you listen to a song and you notice like a different part of the instrumental that adds like a different layer to the like meaning of the song. And
Yeah.
this goes again like against mumble rap. Like go ahead and reveal it. I'm not necessarily a fan of mumble rap, but like because it feels derivative to what you can do with art and what I've seen people be able to do with the art form. The ability to like match syllables up perfectly with the syncopation of a drums in order to make something feel a bit more menacing. The ability to have like a vocal lead in the middle of a break or in the middle of a chorus in order to like really let the reader or the listener like sit back and like digest what was just dropped. Ending a song early or like ending the song on an off note to leave a person with that dissonance to like force them to yearn for a certain conclusion. It's all like it's so amazing, and as you said, just like boundless and infinite with what you can do. And I think that that becomes a struggle for a lot of people. And so now I'm going to immediately play devil's advocate, and in defense of mumble rap, a lot of times it's as we said, imitation is the highest form of flattery. People trying to get that pronounced effect of what I were saying earlier, like matching things up with the syncopation of drums and whatnot,
Mhm.
attempting that and then not being able to get there is another thing. Because like I'm gonna bring up Little Pump again. We don't really know, or I don't necessarily know his like artistic motivation. I don't know what has influenced him, and I don't know like what has led him to making music. Um,
Mhm.
we just kind of assume that it is to make money simply because it's, as I said before, derivative. But at the same time, every single person is going to have a different interpretation of the music. And so I am sure there's someone out there who can defend Little Pump's vocal reasoning in a sense. And it's like, well, no,
I
this
won't.
is actually here because when you match it with something else, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's just that I haven't encountered that argument yet.
I'm not you. I have not heard that one either.
Right. And so this gets into like what we've been talking about overall is the essential like muddled nature of there's my roommate. Hey roommate.
I
We get into the muddled nature of art in a sense because I do think and this is not in defiance of what you were saying, but there are some pieces of art meant to derive zero meaning from. I think actually one of the like most interesting notions of this is just that like I don't want to say the height of pop culture. I'm not an art nerd. I'm sorry if I get these wrong, but there was an artist who had made like his latest like big piece, his latest like big art installation, and it was a urinal. It was just a urinal, and it was placed like in the middle. It was I think it was right in front of the Museum of Modern Art actually, and it was just put there, and like this that was his art. It was a urinal, and it's like,
that probably
of
that
course,
probably
like
took this
the question,
so much time to figure out.
right? Exactly. It's like, there's because the art wasn't art in the sense that for it to be like appraised and valued for like its like brushstrokes and whatnot. I think the true value of that urinal being in front of the Museum of Modern Art was to make people evaluate what they think art is, which is honestly a can of worms that we're halfway into.
Yes.
There's so many like different ways to view art, and um wrapping this back to what where we started. I think in terms of Black art, one thing that I do really appreciate is that in our current age and stage of life, with the internet and whatnot, we get to see a lot more diverse interpretations of using the lens of music rap. For example, we have people like Rico Nasty, who is producing tracks that are like extremely diverse and against the grand. We have Megan Thee Stallion, Pray for Her Safety, who is creating tracks that I don't want to like slap the label of women's empowerment on it because that feels somewhat reductionist to what she's like really saying. We have artists like Cardi B. Of course, we have Nicki Minaj. She's been here for a while and will be here for a while. Beyonce as well. All of these Black artists creating, in a sense, that and evolving in a way that is calmingly appreciated and not evolving in a way that is like reductive, like Little Pump. I'm really, really
You just go.
I'm taking a bite out of him today.
It's really fun. But yeah, I feel
And
you. It's amazing. It's really exciting to see. I would, because you mentioned um, Black artists who are women. I think that's an important thing to mention as well. And I don't know why. I guess you were talking about Cardi B and Meg. I was thinking of City Girls that came up too.
Mhm.
And I know people are like, oh, that's not really my type of music. It's really vulgar.
Mhm.
It's not my type of thing.
Right,
First of all, rappers who are men have been saying those things from their perspective for years. So let's just get that out the way.
right,
And then
right.
the second part,
It's just
making you
true.
uncomfortable. Yeah, it is true, but it's making you uncomfortable. And
Right,
that in itself deserves to be questioned. Why does it make you
right.
uncomfortable? Comfortable? Who is the audience? Maybe it's not for
Hmm.
you. And
Hmm.
simply, thank you for this art. I'm going to put that to the side and listen to something else. And it
Right,
allows you to evaluate. Anything can be turned into an essay or a topic for critical consideration and critical thinking.
and
But
that's why this
it
podcast exists.
exactly why we're here. That's why we're here. But it makes you
Right,
think. It makes you feel something. And maybe in that moment you're not really feeling it and you want to decide for another time when you think you need it.
Right.
But it's amazing to see these artists break into the industry and earn their appropriate
Stripes.
amount of for their track, for their expression, because I am sick and tired of women and people of different gender identities not getting the appropriate pay and the appropriate compensation
Right.
for their work.
Not
So
getting their
it's
time in the light, in a sense. It's
exactly, and the fame, they deserve it.
right. It's very important as a culture movement to allow for these voices to exist and allow us to be able to examine them not only in like a professional light of like, okay, well, this is the lyric breakdown, or like this is how and why this flute comes in at 2 minutes and 12 seconds. It's also important to be there because as you said before, if you're not enjoying that type of music, you have to sit back and really understand in the grand scheme of things why you don't enjoy that music. And like, especially if the music isn't necessarily that distinct from other like domineering movements. As you said, for example, like males talking about, for lack of a better word, using females for sexual and financial gain.
Yes.
How come when the switch is flipped, it's a problem? It's like, if that is a problem, why is it a problem? It's like
Exactly.
that doesn't seem like something that we should really be focusing on because there's a lot more like pressing issues, for example, like climate change. Of course, that
There's that.
is a little bit of a straw man, and so apologize for that, but it still needs to be said.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You summed it up. And I think the most important thing through all of that whole conversation that we had about music, it is a time for you to reflect. And maybe
Hmm.
the time for you to reflect is not during the song, so you can enjoy the song, because
Hmm.
some artists just enjoy
Right.
the music and do. But in this topic of artists who are women and artists who are men talking about similar topics and expressing themselves in similar ways, that invites the conversation for why does it make you uncomfortable? What are you deriving from this song? Is that a good thing? And good is even relative. So
Right.
in
Right.
the scheme
And
of
then
our
this also, in a sense, goes into somewhat of a bigger conversation about gender roles, which
Mhm.
is not something we're going to cover because we're going to move into our closing thoughts. Kayla, I have to ask you, is there any black art or black artists that you would like to shout out or promote in a sense? And if not, is there anything that you've been really enjoying recently?
Oof, that's a good question. I am always listening to music. I listen to music, oh my gosh, hours out of the day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I think there maybe isn't a specific artist. I'm listening to Kaleem Taylor right now,
Hmm.
Kaleemtaylor, and that's an artist that I'm really vibing with right now. So I'll shout him out.
Hmm.
And he's from the UK. But I think in general, I try to be intentional about the music I consume. And so I was thinking the other day about just a concept, maybe an initiative or hashtag like mediocre music has got to go. There is not enough time for mediocre subpar sounds. There's so
Right.
much talent there. There's an immense amount of talent that has yet to be, it's discovered. People are listening to it, but it's yet to be put in the limelight or uplifted in the way it should be. So
Right.
I think in closing thoughts, if you are serious about art or if you just want to listen to music or watch movies, be intentional about the people behind the scenes, the people creating it. So I would say Pose comes to mind, the show Pose from, I think is it on FX? But it's also on Netflix. And
Hmm.
how can I describe Pose in a short blurb? It's one of my favorite shows, and it's about the ballroom scene in New York and I think 80s, 90s era. And it's such an important conversation to have about transgender folks and transgender rights and expression. And I see we were talking about Janet Mock a little bit ago, and Janet Mock is an amazing human being, but also the entire cast and the crew of Pose deserves so much praise. And shows like that are highlighting the voices of people who have not been represented and not been taken care of. The way we treat transgender people, I got an issue with that. And people of different gender identities and sexual orientations, it's just a real problem. But in this sense, consuming art that is maybe not specifically made for you, maybe it's time for you to tap into that space and appreciate the creation that is there for you, because it takes time, it takes effort, it takes tapping into a space. So I think showing appreciation for art that has so much value, and like we said, it's not mediocre. There's no more time for mediocre art. There's just an immense amount of talent. So taking the time and being intentional about consuming great work.
All right, all right. And I think one thing that I'd like to add, which kind of a little bit summarizes your whole not spiel, but kind of the bottom line, is to make sure to not have too much of a distinction between the art and the artist, because the artist made the art for a very specific reason. And so when it comes to being intentional, understand what you're evaluating, or like what you're experiencing and why you're experiencing it.
Yep.
Other than that, I think we are about to come to an end.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today, Kayla. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all of the live streamers who popped in and out. We appreciate you noticing us. Of course, I think this is going to be up on Instagram for another 24 hours for people to look at, so that'll be cool. Other than that, you can find the Quixotic topic on Spotify and Apple Music. It's at the same name, the Quixotic topic. And this will be up on YouTube soon. Thank you
Great.
so much for watching. And there's my roommate in the back.
I love
As
it.
always, this is DP from the QT, signing out.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.